There are two inventions that we have in our history that I am very thankful for. One is wheels, and the other one is tables. I don't know what we would do if we didn't have things to place our things on. This Bible would be very heavy if I had to hold it the whole time while I was in the pulpit. It would be very difficult to eat all the time off the floor or to hold your food with one hand and eat with the other. There are many places that we have tables that are important in our lives. Besides our chairs to hold light or to put our coffee cup on or whatever beverage we may be drinking. Beside our bed for an alarm clock or a lamp. The tailgate of a truck becomes a place where deals are made, where things are repaired, where people just sit to have conversation. Tables are very important in our life. They are desks. They are the places we gather around to share stories. In our first call in Lawrence, Kansas, my husband and I shared a position. It was one job, and we shared it. We began that with one desk as well. Now, that one desk was not necessarily the best plan for us. So you see, some of you like your tables to be very clean and don't want things piled upon them. And others of you have tables where that's where everything lands, and you just lay it on the table, and at some point you'll get to it. Well, I live with piles, and my husband lives with clean tops. So you can see that we needed another table. It was necessary to have two tables for our working relationship to work. Many of you have tables that way. Tables that are crowded with people who sit around them, and tables that are empty, waiting for something to be placed on them. Table has been something that has been on my mind this past week, and I was especially after our Christmas Eve service and Pastor Stephen's sermon. He reminded us, first of all, that the manger was a place where many gathered. Many people, many animals, every kind of creature gathered at a manger. It was a place of joy, and it was a place of birth. It was a manger. The table for animals became the table where all gathered around as they witnessed the birth. It was a place where the poorest of the poor came and where the richest of the rich came. From the homeless and dirty to the royalty of kings. People from all experiences of life traveled far and near to share in that moment of new hope, and they were welcomed. Pastor Stephen also, in his own way, reminded us that the manger was not necessarily a clean place, but it was a messy place. It was messy because in that place, life had happened. In that place, animals lived. It was not perfectly arranged. It was not clean. And it certainly wasn't clean after the visitors left. This manger, this table, enters our messy world, a world where people have been hurt and betrayed by those they love, a world who wait for a word of welcome, a word of acceptance, a word of forgiveness. The manger or the table enters our messy world, a world where people survive on whatever handouts they can find. They sleep without beds, who keep it together long enough until the next crisis and wait for the day when they can once again feel honor and pride about who they are and what they do. This manger, this table, enters our messy world of suspicion and hatred, and stands with open arms to those who have been victims of racism, of sexism, and ageism, who dream of a day when a person's worthiness is no longer judged by the color of their skin, their gender, or how young or old they are. A day when they can truly trust one another. This manger, this table, enters our messy world of doubt and fear. A world where we are so dependent upon what somebody might say that we shut down ideas and we don't make necessary changes that might be necessary to protect our future. You know, we have, as we were reminded, we have a manger scene that's outside our doors, and I'm thankful every year that we have the youth of our church to continue to do these things for our church. But what do those who come to the manger find when they walk through the doors? Are they overcome by the grace of God as witnessed in our fellowship together? Are they overwhelmed by the hospitality and love that we share with each other? Will they want to return again because their unique gifts and talents were celebrated and welcomed? And what about those who come for the first time? Those who are new, that have never been here? What do they find when they walk through the doors? On Christmas Eve, our table was set in front of the Bethlehem scene that had been put up here for our Christmas program. The table rolled from the chapel into our sanctuary and was placed here down front with that crib right next to it. It's very symbolic to me that we witnessed the table brought into our midst. It was placed there so that we could rejoice and share in this hope that was born before us, this hope that God had promised us and came to us in flesh and blood. And this hope that we surround every time we worship around the bread and the wine, symbols of the hope that God brought to us. We come forward to this table that is set in the midst of our lives, in the midst of our messy lives, and says, here, this is for you. When God chose to come in that manger, God did not choose to change everything about the world first or take away all the bad. God chose to just enter it, to come into the midst of whatever's happening in our lives, the good, the bad, the awful, the sad. God comes into the world, the messy world, every moment of our lives. As that table is placed here in front of us, wherever the table is placed, it is a reminder that God shows up, comes to us in the messy part of life. The meal that night was offered to everyone, as it is to us today. There were no rules, there were no qualifications, there were no contracts. It was an invitation. An invitation to come forward and receive the grace of God present in the eating and the drinking of the bread and wine. And the people came. Hundreds were fed and nourished at this table. They came with their stories. Some came walking forward with a solid understanding of their faith. Some came with a total lack of faith. But those who came heard the invitation to come and see what God has done at the manger and what God is doing at the table. This invitation is given to every time this congregation gathers to worship. Every week we have the opportunity to gather around the table to receive this awesome gift of love and hope from God. Every week we are invited to walk forth regardless of how messy our lives are and meet God in the bread and the wine. God is not afraid of the messiness of our lives. Jesus walked in the messiness of our lives. And through Jesus, God meets us here in the messiness and places the table in the center of our chaos, of our doubts, of our fears, and fills us with hope and grace. Hear the invitation today. Come and gather around the table. Bring your doubts. Bring your strong faith. Gather around as we celebrate a God who comes to us in the midst of the messiness. Amen.